She was the most desired woman on the planet. Every man wanted her. Every woman wanted to be her. Her face sold millions of magazines. Her smile stopped traffic, and her name became synonymous with beauty itself. But behind the platinum blonde hair, behind the red lips, behind the laugh that made the whole world feel warm, she was completely, devastatingly alone. The world knew Marilyn Monroe. Nobody knew Norma Jeane. The girl who grew up in foster homes, who was told she was nobody, who was used by an industry that saw her as a body and never once as a human being. She gave Hollywood everything, and Hollywood gave her a bottle of pills and a locked door. This is the story of the most iconic woman of the 20th century, and the world still does not know the full truth.
Her real name was Norma Jeane Mortensen. She was born on June 1, 1926, in Los Angeles, California, not into a family, but into chaos. Her mother, Gladys, was mentally ill and completely unable to care for her. Her father was absent, not just physically, but entirely. A name on a document that meant nothing in real life. Before Norma Jeane could walk properly, she had already been handed to strangers. She spent her childhood moving between foster homes and the Los Angeles orphans' home, not because no one wanted her, but because the system had nowhere else to put a little girl whose mother was in a psychiatric institution and whose father did not exist. She was passed from family to family, some kind, some cold, some dangerous. She was sexually abused as a child, more than once, by more than one person. She told the adults around her. Some did not believe her. Some did not care. She learned very early that her pain was not important to the people who were supposed to protect her. By the time she was a teenager, Norma Jeane had developed one coping mechanism: she was beautiful, and she knew how to make people look at her. Not out of vanity, out of survival. Attention meant safety. Being noticed meant not being invisible. And invisibility, for a girl who had spent her entire childhood being passed around like an object nobody quite wanted, was the most terrifying thing in the world. At 16, she married her neighbor James Doherty. Not out of love, but to avoid being sent back to the orphanage when her guardian could no longer keep her. A child marrying to escape institutional care. That was the beginning of Marilyn Monroe. Not glamour. Not Hollywood. A teenager with no options making the only choice available to her. Hollywood called her difficult. Hollywood called her unprofessional. Hollywood never once asked why. By the early 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was everywhere. Her face was on every magazine. Her name was in every headline. And yet the woman behind the name was still Norma Jeane, still frightened, still searching, still desperately trying to find one person in a room full of thousands who saw her as something more than a body with a smile attached to it. The turning point began not in a film studio but in an acting class. Marilyn walked into the actors' studio in New York and sat down among serious theatrical actors who had no interest in Hollywood glamour. Her teacher, Lee Strasberg, saw something in her that the entire film industry had missed entirely. Not a blonde, not a body, a genuinely extraordinary actress with emotional depths that most performers spend entire careers trying to reach. For the first time in her life, someone in a position of power looked at Marilyn Monroe and saw Norma Jeane, and told her she was worth something real. She threw herself into the work completely. She studied, she read voraciously. She carried books of poetry and philosophy that the press photographed with barely concealed mockery, as if a woman who looked like Marilyn Monroe had no business having an inner life. She did not care. She was building something inside herself that nobody could take away. And it showed on screen. Her performance in Bus Stop in 1956 stunned critics who had spent years dismissing her as a pretty distraction. Her work in Some Like It Hot in 1959 produced one of the most genuinely funny and technically precise comedic performances in Hollywood history. Billy Wilder, who directed her and complained endlessly about her lateness and anxiety on set, later admitted that the camera loved her in a way it loved almost nobody else. That whatever she was doing, however she was doing it, the result was pure magic. Then came the marriages that the world watched obsessively. Joe DiMaggio, the most famous baseball player in America, fell completely in love with her. Their marriage lasted 9 months. He wanted a wife. She was already the world's most famous woman. There was no space in that marriage for both of those things to exist simultaneously. Then came Arthur Miller, one of the greatest playwrights of the 20th century. The press called it the most unlikely couple on earth. The intellectual and the blonde. What they missed entirely was that Marilyn was the intellectual too. Miller knew it. He wrote for her, believed in her, and for a time gave her something she had been searching for since childhood, the feeling of being genuinely known by another human being. But the miscarriages came. 3 pregnancies. 3 losses, each one taking something from her that the films and the fame and the photographers could never give back. The depression deepened. The dependency on sleeping pills that had started as a coping mechanism became something far more serious. And the film industry, which had built an empire on her image, was already beginning to look for someone younger, someone easier, someone who would not cost them the trouble of dealing with a real human being. On August 4, 1962, in her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, Norma Jeane Mortensen took her last breath. She was 36 years old. The official cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning, an overdose of sleeping pills. Whether it was accidental, intentional, or something darker that powerful people in powerful places have spent decades trying to keep quiet, the world has never fully agreed. And that uncertainty, that unresolved question hanging permanently in the air above her story, is perhaps the most heartbreaking part of all. She deserved a clear ending. She never got one. When the news broke on August 5, 1962, the reaction was immediate and global. Newspapers ran her photograph on every front page. Radio stations interrupted their programming. People who had never met her sat down and wept without fully understanding why. Because Marilyn Monroe had done something that very few public figures ever truly manage, she had made millions of people feel personally connected to her. Not to the image, not to the blonde hair and the red lips and the white dress above the subway grate. To her, to the warmth, the vulnerability, the genuine human need to be loved that radiated from every photograph, every performance, every laugh she ever gave the world. She left behind no children. No husband, an estate worth far less than her image had generated for an industry that had used her completely and compensated her poorly. She left behind a small collection of books. Poetry, philosophy, literature, that told the story of a mind the world had refused to take seriously while she was alive. And she left behind 30 films, a handful of which are among the finest comedic and dramatic performances Hollywood has ever produced. But her real legacy was never the films. It was the conversation she started, the one that is still happening today. About what the entertainment industry does to the women it builds and then destroys. About the cost of being desired by an entire world while being known by nobody in it. About mental health, about childhood trauma, about the way society consumes vulnerable people and then mourns them theatrically once they are gone. Every conversation about Hollywood exploitation, about the treatment of women in the entertainment industry, about the gap between a public image and a private reality. Marilyn Monroe is somewhere at the beginning of that conversation, whether her name is mentioned or not. She became immortal in a way that the studio system that owned her never anticipated and never deserved. Andy Warhol painted her face in repeating blocks of color and turned her into the defining image of 20th century pop art. Madonna built an entire era of her career on Marilyn's aesthetic. Kim Kardashian wore her actual dress. Generations of artists, musicians, writers, and filmmakers have returned to her story again and again, not because of the glamour, but because of the pain underneath it, because of the question her life keeps asking the world. What did we do to her? And why did we let it happen? She came into the world as a girl nobody wanted. She left it as the most recognizable face in human history. And somewhere between those two facts, in the gap between Norma Jeane and Marilyn, is one of the most important stories the 20th century ever produced. A story about beauty and exploitation, about talent and trauma, about the price of being everything to everyone while being nothing to yourself. The world is still paying that price. And Marilyn Monroe is still waiting, somewhere in every photograph, every frame of film, every poster on every wall, for someone to finally tell her story honestly. This was our attempt.